You're not gonna believe this, but I gotta tell someone before it eats me alive. It's about the White Thang. Yeah, that's what we call it round these parts. Folks in Alabama whisper about it like it's some bedtime story to scare kids into behaving, but let me tell you, it ain't no story. I grew up hearing about the White Thang from my granddaddy. He used to sit out on the porch in his old rocker, spitting tobacco into a rusty can, and tell us kids about the creature. Said it'd been seen all over the place, from Happy Hollow to Wheeler Wildlife Refuge. He'd talk about farmers finding their livestock torn to shreds, folks hearing blood-curdling screams in the dead of night, and hunters catching glimpses of something big and white moving too fast through the trees to be natural. They say it's a ghost, Granddaddy'd say, or maybe a demon. Whatever it is, it's older than all of us put together, and it don't take kindly to folks wandering too far into its territory. He'd look at us real serious, his eyes squinting under that beat-up hat of his. You see its eyes, you best pray. If it's grinning at you, well, you better run. We'd laugh it off back then, thinking it was just one of Granddaddy's tall tales. But part of me always wondered, there's a lot of strange things in these woods, things that don't make sense. Fast forward to last summer. I was having a rough go of it. Work was kicking my ass. My girl was mad at me over God knows what. And I was just plain fed up with everything. Thought I'd clear my head with a walk in the woods behind my uncle's property near Tuscumbia. That's up in Colbert County, if you're not familiar. Those woods have always been my sanctuary. Figured I'd walk it off, maybe do a little thinking. Now, my uncle's always been a bit of a character. He's one of those old-timers who's seen just about everything but talks about half of it. He's got stories about folks disappearing near his property, swears up and down he's seen shadows moving through the trees that don't belong to anything natural. I'd always taken it with a grain of salt. He'd sit on the porch with his shotgun across his lap, saying, "Ain't nothing coming out of those woods that's gonna catch me off guard." That image stuck with me as I wandered off that day, trying to shake the stress off my shoulders. It started out peaceful enough. Late afternoon sun was pouring through the trees and the air smelled like pine and fresh dirt. I followed this old deer trail I've known since I was a kid, the one that winds down by the creek and then loops back up toward the ridge. It was quiet. Too quiet now that I think about it. No birds, no squirrels, not even the sound of wind in the trees. Just me and the crunch of my boots on the ground. I tried to ignore it, but there's something about that kind of quiet that sets your teeth on edge. About halfway to the ridge, I started getting this weird feeling, like I wasn't alone. It was subtle at first, like the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up for no reason. Then, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Just a flash of white, quick as a blink, darting between the trees. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart thumping so loud it felt like it was echoing off the pines. I told myself it was a deer, maybe a coyote with some mange making its fur look pale. But deep down, I knew better. I'd heard enough stories to know what it could be. I kept walking, trying to act normal, but my senses were on high alert. Every little sound made me jump. The twig snapping, leaves rustling, even my own breathing. And then I heard it. The scream. It wasn't human, but it wasn't an animal either. high-pitched, almost like a woman in pain, but distorted, like it was echoing from somewhere deep underground. My chest tightened, and for a second, I couldn't move. It was the kind of sound that gets inside your head, makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world. I turned in circles, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from, but it felt like it was everywhere at once. And then, out of nowhere, I saw it again. This time, it wasn't just a blur. It was standing there, maybe 30 yards away, half hidden behind a cluster of trees, tall, at least 7 feet, with long, gangly limbs that looked almost too thin to hold it up. Its fur was the whitest white I'd ever seen, almost glowing in the shadows, and its eyes, Lord, its eyes. They were this eerie, reflective yellow, like a cat's in the dark, but more intense. They seemed to cut right through me, like it could see every thought I'd ever had. I remembered Granddaddy's words then, about the grin. Sure enough, there it was. It had this wide, twisted grin full of sharp, uneven teeth, like it was amused by me, like it was enjoying the fact that I was scared out of my mind. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. I could only stand there, staring at it, as it tilted its head like it was studying me. Then it moved. Not like any animal I've ever seen. It didn't walk or run. It glided, smooth and fast, barely making a sound. 1 second it was behind the trees, and the next it was closer, maybe 20 yards away. I could see its claws now, long and curved, like they were made for tearing flesh. It let out another scream, louder this time, and I swear it rattled my bones. That snapped me out of it. I turned and bolted, running as fast as I could back the way I came. The woods seemed darker, like the sun had decided to pack it in early. Branches clawed at my arms and face, and I stumbled more times than I cared to admit. I could hear it behind me, crashing through the underbrush, but it didn't sound like it was running. It sounded like it was toying with me, keeping just close enough to make sure I knew it was there. When I finally saw the clearing where my uncle's house was, I almost cried. I burst through the back door, slammed it shut, and locked it. My uncle was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, and he looked up at me like I'd lost my damn mind. "What's wrong with you, boy?" he asked, setting his cup down. I tried to catch my breath, but the words were tumbling out of me faster than I could think. "It's out there," I gasped. "The White Thang. I saw it." His face went serious, and he nodded like he'd been expecting this. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I've seen it too." He didn't say much more, just told me to sit down and poured me a shot of whiskey. We sat there in silence, the weight of what I'd seen hanging heavy in the air. That was the night I learned the stories were true. The White Thang wasn't just some legend to scare kids. It was real, and it was out there, watching, waiting. I haven't set foot in those woods since. Sometimes, though, late at night, when everything's quiet, I swear I can still hear that scream. And when I do, I pray it stays in the woods where it belongs. And if you're ever out that way, and you hear something that don't sound quite right, do yourself a favor. Turn around. Don't go looking for it. Trust me, you don't want to see it grin.